All right, let's go ahead and continue with our video lecture for chapter 21. We're looking at the age of isms. So there's going to be a lot of terminology in the modern era. Remember, modern era is unit 5 from 1750 to 1900. And a lot of this terminology includes words that end with ism. So there's a historian term called the age of isms. So let's talk about some of these isms, right? We talked about liberalism, right, and conservatism, but let's move on to socialism, and we're gonna get into more detail about socialism in a future chapter, and actually in the next chapter. But socialism is a kind of modification at first of liberalism. So liberalism is all about the political equality of people. What we start seeing is that across Europe, it starts in Europe, in the late 1800s, there's going to be a shift into people starting to believe that there should be an economic equality as well. In other words, everyone has the same wealth. So this is what we call socialism. The famous founder, the most credited founder of socialism is a guy called Karl Marx, right? He is also known for Marxism, which we'll get to in our next chapter. But this is at the time of the Industrial Revolution. So there's a group of socialists who believe that they can create a perfect society. And they call this utopian socialism, utopia being a perfect place. So what they try to do is they basically set up these small working communities where everyone works together, everyone shares in the profits of each other's work. Everyone is an equal owner, so they have like a factory where everyone works together to produce goods, to sell, to export. But there wasn't a single owner. Every worker was an owner, and therefore every worker received an equal share. And we start seeing these communities kind of pop up. At first it starts in England. We also see it eventually in the United States. But at first these are successful, right? When they're small scale, maybe 50 or 100 people or 100 families at the most. But once you start trying to adapt socialism to a huge population of millions of people, the system doesn't really work. And we'll talk more about that later on when we look at communism in the 20th century. So keep in mind, of course, the definitions for classical liberalism, this idea that individual freedom is the most important thing, and that the more freedom a person has, the less authority the government has. So it's like a balance. So the more government power is in the hands of the government, the less freedoms the individual has. And liberalism is going to be the driving force behind the different revolutions that we've mentioned in this chapter, the Atlantic revolutions, but they're also going to see a lot of unsuccessful revolutions across Europe into the 1800s, right? 1848 being the most important year because they kind of like spread out all over Europe. And the classical liberalism will be credited for coming up with ideas about universal male suffrage, meaning that every male has the right to vote regardless of your wealth or your social status. And of course this would eventually be adopted by feminists in the 20th century who are going to fight, and suffragists I should say, who are going to fight for women's right to vote. We also see that they're going to demand people the ability to vote for directly vote for parliamentary leaders, right, for representatives, and which is a big part of a constitutional republic. Liberalism is also going to argue that a military should be weak. Right? There shouldn't be a lot of funding to the military because that money should be spent elsewhere. Remember, the more money goes to the military, the more taxes people have to pay. So liberalism is all about individual freedoms and trying to put restrictions on government authority, at least classical liberalism. All right, the next thing we're looking at is going to be nationalism. We mentioned this over and over and over again, but let's rephrase it, let's categorize it, let's get a perfect definition of nationalism, right? It is a belief that people who share a common language and history and culture, who live in a specific area that has borders, right, that they should be able to rule themselves. They should be free from foreign domination. Remember, nationalism starts in France, right? The first modern nation state is France, right? During the French Revolution, when France is under attack. Nationalism will spread thanks to Napoleon. Well, it will spread across Europe as he conquers Europe. Nationalism is going to stir up, resistance against the French Empire. And that is where we see the unification take place, right? Because people in what was called back then Prussia and the Holy Roman Empire, right, where you have some German-speaking people in one country and some German-speaking people in another country, and some Italian-speaking people in one city-state and some Italian-speaking people in another city-state or another empire, and they're going to start arguing and start wondering, why isn't there a country for Germans or a country for Italians, a nation state? So nationalist movements are going to lead to the creation of modern day Germany, modern day Italy. Remember, before this time period, there was no Germany, there was no Italy. These were all the people living in these areas were part of different city-states or empires or countries. But now we see the German state, the nation state, and the Italian nation state form. And a lot of nationalism, you can see, the colors and the symbols of a flag, right? That's going to be a big important. It's going to be a lot of artwork, like you see here. This lady, carrying a sword, defending the motherland, defending the fatherland, right? Covered in the colors of the flag, right? Kind of like the Uncle Sam in American nationalist beliefs, right? So art is going to be a big part of nationalism. Music and history and literature are all going to kind of reinforce nationalist ideals. All right, so that is it for our 7th part. I'll see you for the 8th and final part next time. Thanks for watching and learning. And both things, watching and learning.